Los Angeles. This is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Hi, I'm Areva Martin, and today's episode of the Special Report hits painfully close to home. I'm talking about my childhood home of North St. Louis, Missouri. On May 16th, a tornado tore through that community with terrifying force. It uprooted lives, flattened homes, and carved a path of destruction through neighborhoods already strained by decades of neglect. But what came after the storm was equally devastating. In the critical hours and days that followed, families, many Black and brown, waited for help, waited for FEMA, waited for the government they were told would show up when everything else fell apart. But help never came. Today, we're talking with the former mayor of St. Louis, Tishaura Jones, and Carla, a longtime resident whose family was directly impacted by the destructive tornado. I'll be asking the hard questions. Where is FEMA? Why are Black communities still waiting in the wreckage? And what does it say about America when the response to disaster depends on your zip code or the color of your skin? See, this is more than a natural disaster. It's a man-made failure. And we're digging into who's being left behind and why. So let's get into it. Joining me now is former Mayor of St. Louis, Tishaura Jones. She has led recovery efforts in some of the hardest hit areas of St. Louis and has a unique perspective on what's broken and what's needed to fix. Now, Mayor Jones, you and I have a long-time relationship, so I should also acknowledge and disclose that you and I are like sisters, we're like family, and I'm so grateful for, one, our relationship, grateful for your leadership, and grateful for you taking a pivotal role, or playing a pivotal role in the recovery of your hometown, my hometown. So let's just, start at the beginning. What did you see in North St. Louis the day after the horrific storm? I think the exact day of the storm was May 16th. So just take us back to that day and describe that day itself and then the aftermath.
Yeah, Areva, again, thank you for lifting this critical issue because people are hurting in North St. Louis. And for your viewers' edification, North St. Louis is 99% African American, and all of the victims of the tornado have been Black and brown, or victims who've lost their lives or mostly injured. And on May 16th, an EF3 tornado hit St. Louis. And there were, the sirens did not go off in St. Louis City. They went off in St. Louis County. And so when people say that they heard the sirens, they were actually close enough to the city-county line to hear St. Louis County's sirens going off. There are families who believe that if the sirens went off as they were supposed to, that could have saved lives. And in the aftermath, there were homes that were totally dilapidated. One of my former staffers lost the front porch and the roof off of the home that he shares with his aunt and uncle. And in the days after, it was difficult to even get down his street because there were trees everywhere, there was debris everywhere. You had roofs missing, fronts of homes missing, back of homes missing, where you could just see straight into the back of their home. You can see bunk beds that hadn't been touched. It was really, the devastation was everywhere, and it was up to the people to make sure that we were able to clear off the debris. In the hours after the storm, the mayor herself told people not to self-deploy. But how can you tell people not to self-deploy when people are hurting, people are in need? And so Action St. Louis stepped up and started the People's Response. You see the T-shirt that I'm wearing. They have been active since May 17th, actually May 16th. They started just by handing out, hot food and hot meals, and that grew to toiletries and everything that people needed. We deployed thousands of volunteers all across affected areas to make sure that we are helping to clean up, that we're helping to tarp roofs, bringing in skilled people with skills, tearing down trees and using tools that people are actually bringing in themselves to cut trees down to make sure that, trees aren't going to fall any further on people. It has been a totally volunteer-led effort, and it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable because where is our government? Where is FEMA? Where is the state emergency management? Because the people that are in need are mostly African Americans. And we all know that, unfortunately, when mostly African Americans are those who are hurt, that the nation, the city turns a blind eye to their pain.
Let me just level set for a minute, Tishaura. Thank you for sharing that. And I can hear the passion in your voice. I can hear the pain in your voice. But this EF3 tornado cut a 23-mile-long path, touching down in affluent suburbs of Clayton, Missouri, which is a suburb right outside of St. Louis, before ripping through the north side of St. Louis, which you said is 99% Black, then across the Mississippi River through communities in Western Illinois. What we know is that at least 5 people were killed as a result of this tornado. 38 more were injured. About 5,000 structures were damaged, with property losses estimated at more than $1.6 billion. So I just wanted to give people a sense of the scale of the devastation that happened. If you live in places like Missouri, you may be accustomed to tornadoes, but if you live outside of the Midwest or the South, you may not even appreciate that a tornado can do the kind of damage that was done to the St. Louis community on May 16th. You asked the question, where is FEMA? What we do know is without the President of the United States declaring this EF3 tornado a major disaster, St. Louis will not get resources from important federal agencies like FEMA, like the SBA, like the EDA, like HUD, and even some financial institutions. So this declaring of a national emergency so critically important. And let's go back to your statements, Tishaura, about where is government when you need them. Do you know what the status of this request by the government of Missouri, the governor of Missouri, the mayor of St. Louis, to have this national disaster declared so that FEMA can activate its emergency response resources? Like, what's the status of that request, if you know?
So from what I know, the request is sitting with FEMA. FEMA came in and did their initial assessment about a week or so ago. And that report then goes to the state, and the state then sends that report to FEMA at the federal level. And then we wait. We wait for the president to approve if St. Louis will be declared a disaster area for the tornado that occurred on May 16th. We did, however, have another tornado on March 14th, and we just received a disaster declaration last week for that tornado. So we're talking over 2 months that people had to wait for the resources to come to St. Louis and St. Louis County so they can apply for SBA loans and apply for reimbursement for FEMA for expenses or expenditures that they incurred while trying to fix their homes or whatever they incurred trying to get whole after the March 14th tornado. So we are still waiting. But while we are waiting, we are staying busy. And again, the people's response has stood in the gap along with For the Ville and Invest STL and other volunteer-led organizations that without these volunteer-led organizations, without people taking off time from work, there would be no response.
Yeah, and let's be clear, FEMA, we use that word a lot. People have heard a lot about FEMA. For those who don't know, FEMA is the designated federal agency responsible for disaster relief. It is the linchpin in terms of receiving disaster relief from other federal agencies and, as I said, even financial institutions. But you can only activate FEMA if there is a national emergency declared by the president. So, Tishaura, you said that FEMA has been on the grounds doing its own kind of investigation. I've read some articles that said that they have made a recommendation for something to happen, and now, as you said, is waiting with the president. But what's scary about that is we know the president and other Republicans have been clamoring for the dismantling of FEMA. We know the organization has been intentionally scaled down to the tune of over $646 million that have been cut from its budget. What do you say about this? Trump and the Doge team said this was cutting fraud, waste, and abuse. What do you say the dismantling or the downscaling of FEMA is?
If you're dismantling FEMA, then what are cities and states going to do when there are other weather events? And I don't say if, I say when, because climate change is real. Where we see hurricanes hitting mountain communities in North Carolina, for example, that would never thought in a million years that they would see a hurricane in that area. Where we haven't seen a tornado of this magnitude in North St. Louis since 1959. So, my father was a little boy then, the last time we had a tornado hit North St. Louis. So, people are going to suffer because of the cuts to FEMA. And it's really hypocritical for our U.S. senators to vote for those cuts, but then try to put pressure on the president to fund, to declare St. Louis a disaster area. The two don't mix. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right.
And so
are you saying that, do you know if the two Republican Missouri U.S. senators voted to cut FEMA's budget?
They did. They voted to cut FEMA's budget, and now they are putting pressure on the president for him to declare St. Louis as a disaster area. It's hypocrisy on steroids.
Yeah, that seems to be a common theme amongst many Republicans. Whether they're trying to curry favor with Donald Trump, whether they're trying to protect themselves from being primaried, many of them are voting for this, dismantling of major departments like FEMA, and then find themselves, like you said, in this position where their state has now been hit by a natural disaster, whether that's Florida or Arkansas or some of these other red states. Right. And needing the very same agencies that they have been so actively trying to dismantle. But I wonder, Tishaura, you've been in government for the good part of your professional career. So yes, I've read that your governor, the governor of Missouri, a Republican, and your two Republican senators have been trying to press Donald Trump to use his discretion, because it's solely within the discretion of the president to declare this disaster that's needed to activate these funds. But how much are they really pushing? And if this disaster had really devastated other parts of St. Louis where there are non-African American residents, do you think the push would be any different?
Absolutely not. If this tornado had only hit North St. Louis and had not hit more affluent places, parts of St. Louis like Clayton and Ladue and the Central West End, the many mansions in the Central West End, we would not see a push for a disaster declaration from our elected officials on the state and federal level. And while we wait for Trump to act, people are still suffering. We have people living in tents on their property because St. Louis bricks are known to be very, very valuable things, and so they're trying to protect their homes. They're trying to protect their belongings. So they're living in tents. People's homes are being declared condemned, and so they can't stay there anymore. Some still haven't had their electricity returned because as Carla said, the electrical box was torn away from the home, or it is no longer safe for the power to be returned to some structures. It's a myriad of things. And what we've been able to glean from the people we survey as we serve them, because we're collecting the data, that over 60% of St. Louisans, period, are renters. And over 70% of those renters do not have renters insurance.
Wow.
So no one is coming to save us, and we are left to our own devices to save ourselves. And that's why we have this radical collaboration between these community groups, and this is not their normal functions to provide resources to community.
Action
St. Louis, right?
For the culture STL,
for the culture STL, for the Ville, and Invest STL, just to name a few. But there are dozens of community organizations that have stepped in and to fill the gap where government should be acting. We've had over 8,500 volunteers show up over these last almost 3 weeks that we've been running the resource hub at the O'Fallon YMCA. Over 5,000 households served, and over 3,000 relief kits have been delivered. Because we also have a service that delivers relief kits to people who cannot make it out to any of the hubs. And so, and again, we're collecting data on what people need as we go forward to try to make sure that somebody can be able to meet those needs. And hopefully, if we get a FEMA designation, then we can start helping people fill out that or go through that process as well.
Well, one thing I know recently about, I should say one thing that I know about FEMA, because I've had this recent experience here in Los Angeles with the wildfires, and as great as the work that is being done by those nonprofits that you identified, what those nonprofits typically don't have are enough cash reserves to provide people with cash grants. And that's what makes FEMA so important to these natural disasters. When FEMA came into Los Angeles for the wildfires, people who didn't have insurance and who weren't able to activate their insurance to get temporary housing or vouchers for hotels, FEMA steps in and they can give you immediately a grant, a cash grant. So you can go to a hotel and, pay for a hotel. They can give you a cash grant if you need to rent a car, if you need to purchase groceries, these essential things that you need when you can't move back into your home. So as great as these supplies that you've identified that these nonprofits are giving, are any nonprofits able to do that, substitute what FEMA would do in terms of cash payments or cash grants for hotels or car rental?
Right, so we're raising money as we speak to do that. Anyone who wants to help can go to actionstl.org/tornado and donate, because we are coordinating an effort to try to do cash grants, because under the state of Missouri, unfortunately, it prevents the city from providing direct cash assistance to residents. And then our community foundation, St. Louis Community Foundation, is also raising money to be able to provide cash grants to people. But again, all of this is organic, and it's happening on the local level. We're doing the work that our federal emergency management agencies should be doing, and people are breaching the brink of exhaustion. We've had to extend the end date at the resource hub twice. First, we were going to stop on May 31st, and now we've had to extend it to, well, actually, we were going to do it for a week, and then it got extended to the 31st, and then now to June 6th. So, and we're talking all volunteer staff.
So volunteer meaning no staff, people are no payment staff. These volunteers are not paid staff.
Very few paid staff that work for Action, but for the most part, we rely on volunteers to show up daily, and they have, and thank God for the volunteers that show up on a daily basis. Even I'm volunteering my time as well, but thank God for volunteers, because if not, I don't know what kind of situation we would be in.
So as St. Louis continues to wait, because as of this date, June 4th, June 3rd, There's no response from the Trump administration about whether it is going to declare a disaster, national disaster, so that the FEMA benefits can be activated, so that the SBA benefits, the HUD benefits, so that financial institutions that have a CRA requirement can start to engage. We are witnessing this drama happening at FEMA. The acting head, David Richardson, reportedly said in a meeting to his staff just a day or so ago that he basically didn't know that hurricane season had started, and the hurricane season strategy report about how this national agency was going to respond, people have been waiting for it, apparently is not going to be issued. So what does this tell us, Tishaura, about the status of this really critical agency that has lost $646 million in its budget, that has lost hundreds of its employees, and now has an acting head who, by all accounts, has no expertise or experience in emergency management?
It tells us that if you are in a state or a city that has been a victim of a natural disaster caused by weather, which was caused by climate change, two words, you're screwed. And unfortunately, many more people are going to die. Many more people are going to be injured, and they're going to lose everything they have if we're waiting for the government to come in and save us, or waiting for them to act just to do their job. You know, it has always been a function of federal government to provide assistance when natural disasters hit local cities and states. And under the Biden administration, we had a 1 in 1,000 year flood under my administration, and there was no question if FEMA was going to respond under the previous administration. They were on the ground immediately, and we were able to start getting people help within a week to 10 days when we had a flood back in 2022.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that we had gotten very accustomed to in this country is seeing a president fly into these natural disaster zones to do an assessment of the damage, to offer condolences to the families who lost loved ones, to make a big commitment of federal resources to help those communities rebuild. We're not seeing that. Trump came to California in January after the fires, got into a contentious back and forth with the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass. Basically, it was there that he talked about wanting to dismantle FEMA and shift the responsibility of this kind of natural disaster relief to the states, obviously without a plan, without warning, without anything. So we're not even seeing the ceremonial part of our federal government where you have a president express that kind of empathy. Has Trump or J.D. Vance been to St. Louis, Tishaura, to express condolences to the families?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And as far as I know, I don't know if either of them have expressed condolences, via a letter or anything, because again, all 5 people who died in the May 16th tornado were Black and brown. And the other part of that is we don't, I don't think our state is going to respond in a way that they need to as well. They are currently debating in special session today a bill to give hundreds of millions of dollars to the Kansas City Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs to build a new stadium. But the amount that they are trying to earmark for St. Louis is $25 million.
Yeah, I read that the governor called back its legislative body for a special session. One of the priorities, he said, was this $25 million that would be earmarked for tornado victims. But yes, the bigger issue seems to be this funding for this stadium in Kansas City to keep a professional sports team in that city. So again, we know budgets are statements of priorities, and they tell us a lot about the priorities of the Missouri governor when $25 million is being allocated to a problem that is over 1.6 billion, and yet millions of dollars are being discussed for this stadium. I can't help but ask you a political question, Tishaura, because you are a politician, and we do a lot of politics on this show. Missouri, a red state, a Republican
Bright red.
2 Republican senators, a predominant Republican House legislators, Senate legislators. What are the people, the Trump supporters, who are many in your state? I imagine maybe not all in North St. Louis, but in Clayton and in the Central West End, some of those mini mansions, some of those voters, some of those residents were probably Trump supporters. Are you hearing from anybody in Missouri, whether it's this tornado or the one that hit the southern part of the state in March, saying we made a mistake. We voted for this guy when he needed us, and now we need him, and he's not here for us?
I am hearing some voter remorse in the southern part of Missouri, but not because of the tornado response, because of his response to immigration, because they thought that he was only going to target the criminals. And unfortunately, everyday people, moms, dads, people who have families, people who work hard every day, who've been in this country for decades, are unfortunately being detained and will be sent back to their country of origin. And people are shocked and outraged that the Trump administration would do this. But he told you what he was going to do when he was running, and you just didn't believe, like my grandmother used to say, you just didn't believe that fat meat was greasy. But in other places where there are people with resources, they have the resources to get their roofs back, to call in a contractor ASAP and to pay that expensive deductible in order to get their insurance claims going or get their contractors going. You have a lot of families who don't have the money for the deductibles that are going to that they're going to need to pay in order to get this work started. And then there was this really funky law on the books that the city can keep 25% of an insurance payout. It was targeted towards absentee landlords, but there are some insurers that are reading that or interpreting that to mean, just regular landlords who are trying to fix their properties up for their tenants. So that has also been a wrench that's thrown in all of this.
What do you mean they can keep, the insured can keep up to 25%? 25% of what?
Of the payout. 25% of the payout. So
if
say,
I
for
owned
example,
a building and my building
Right.
was destroyed, say I had 2 families living in it, and I say the damage is $200,000, the insurance company is saying that 50,000 of that 200,000 they can hold back?
an escrow, yes, for the city until
That money gets directed to the city of St. Louis.
Yes. Yes, that has also been a wrench that has been, it's an old ordinance, maybe 10, 20 years old, that was on the books. And again, it was targeted towards absentee landlords that really weren't doing the right thing, so they wouldn't take advantage of insurance claims. However, there are some insurance companies that are interpreting that to mean, interpreting that and targeting your good landlords, your good property owners who are trying to fix properties up to make sure that their tenants have some place to live. So it's a cluster, Areva. It is a huge cluster, and we
catastrophe. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned the words voter remorse. We're talking specifically about Trump voters in Missouri, but you just had an election, re-election for the mayor of St. Louis, which you did not come out on top. You focused a lot in your re-election campaign on North St. Louis, on making investments in North St. Louis, redeveloping North St. Louis, making sure it was thriving. Now North St. Louis has been devastated by this May 16th tornado. Are you hearing any voter remorse in terms of those voters perhaps that voted against you, voted for the new mayor of St. Louis, believing that she somehow would be a better advocate for families living in North St. Louis?
So I I haven't heard voter remorse per se, but what I have heard from community members as I'm volunteering is that we should have listened to you, or we apologize, or um, we voted for you, or you should still be the mayor because, people assume that if I was still the mayor, then we wouldn't have these disjointed efforts going on all across the city, that we would be able to pull people together and in unity and making sure that we're taking care of community. However, that's just not happening. People are calling for this administration to put together a plan of relief, and we're going into the third week after this storm, and we still don't see that. People are suffering. People need hope. People need to know how relief and recovery is going to be structured, and they're just not seeing that at all.
Yeah, from your perspective, obviously, you just talked about a plan of a strategy that brings all of these disparate groups together. What else needs to happen now from your perspective?
What needs to happen now is that people need money to cover their insurance deductibles. They need money for hotel stays because they're like I said, there are people living in tents on their property. People need money to replace things that they lost in the storm. And right now, we're depending totally on community organizations to step up and do so. The Urban League, for example, which we know provides a lot of resources in community, has stepped up to provide hotel vouchers for people who have received the red sticker of condemnation on their homes. And we're thankful for that, but that's not their job. This is the job of our local government. To work with agencies to do that. And we just haven't seen that. People don't know where to go for services.
One of the things when I was in St. Louis recently, and just in the news in general, there's a lot of talk about this money that the city of St. Louis came into as a result of a lawsuit and a settlement involving the Rams when the Rams were leaving the city, that there is a sizable pot of money, over $200 million, that has not been expended. Is that money that could be made available at the local level while this whole FEMA theme is being worked out? Maybe FEMA doesn't come through, or maybe it takes more than a couple of months for FEMA to be activated. Why not use the money from that settlement to give people those hotel vouchers, to give them those cash payments that they will need to meet the deductibles for their insurance claims?
They absolutely can use that money for that because FEMA reimburses cities for their expenditures related to disaster recovery and relief. And there is a bill that is being proposed by the President Megan Green at the Board of Aldermen that will be introduced this Friday to set aside $30 million of the RAM settlement. Now, that's just the interest earned on the money. That's not the actual principal. So it's setting aside about $30 million to help with hotel vouchers, to help with replacing things that people need, and home repair. So that bill will be introduced Friday, and we are hopeful that it will be on a fast track to be passed, so they can get that money into different departments, so they can then deploy resources to help people fix their homes and help people get in safe places to stay while their homes are being repaired.
I want to add another voice to this conversation. Carla, she is a lifelong resident of North St. Louis and one of the many people whose lives were upended when a powerful tornado tore through the city on May 16th. She and her family not only have endured the trauma of that night, but have since faced the harsh reality of what happens when systems meant to protect us fail us. Welcome to the show, Carla. And let me just first express to you my heartfelt just empathy, I will say, for what you are going through. You know, I am a lifelong St. Louiser. I grew up, I don't even know if that's a word, but I think it's St. Louisan. But I grew up on the north side. So just hearing this story and learning about it has been so heartbreaking for me. Let me just start by asking you, how are you and your family doing in this moment?
Honestly, in the grand scheme of things, we're doing okay. We know how fortunate we are in comparison to other people. The house is still standing. It's damaged. It's heavily damaged, but it's still standing. We are back at home in the house, just trying to wrap our minds around the whole marathon process of getting the house back to normal. Like, the roof has to be replaced. We have no air conditioning right now. Just all of the other little things that we have to do. But we also know how blessed we are that we weren't as affected as others. Just a block behind me.
Wow. Take us back, Carla, to that night of May 16th. What did you experience as this tornado ripped through your neighborhood?
Honestly, we knew that it was a bad weather day. It had been forecasted that it would be such, but normally, like, high winds, maybe a few limbs down. That was what we expected. My son and I were at home, and when we realized the storm was here, we actually looked outside and saw a sign literally flying across the front of the house. And we closed the door, the lights went out. I didn't realize at the time, but that was my power box being ripped off the side of my house. And there were no sirens. It took a rock smashing through my dining room window for my son and I to run down to the basement.
Wow.
So it was just, we were down there just terrified. I'm texting my husband who was trying to get home, and it was just chaos.
You know, Carl, we've heard a lot about the failure of this siren to go off, this emergency response. We know the administrator for the city of St. Louis has been placed on some kind of leave, the person who was responsible for, using that siren. What would you have done differently if you had heard the siren?
I would have gone downstairs faster. I definitely would not have opened my front door, not knowing that the tornado was literally barreling down on us. We did get notices on our cell phones, but that has not been a common practice. It's normally the sirens. When we hear the sirens, we go down to the basement. So we would have gone down a little bit faster. It wouldn't have taken a rock coming through the window for us to run downstairs.
And Tishaura, I'll bring you back into the conversation. We've heard a lot about this siren and the failure of this siren to be used. What can you tell us about, that whole system? What should have happened if everything was working properly, at the local level on this night of May 16?
Yeah, so Areva, we had another tornado on March 14th, and the sirens went off then. The sirens have never failed to go off when needed under my administration. And from what we understand, the FEMA director did make the phone call to activate the sirens, and they just were not activated for whatever reason. And I firmly believe that people's lives could have been saved. 5 people lost their lives on May 16th, and a lot of and there are people who are saying that if the sirens went off in time, that could have saved lives. I personally know a family who lost their loved one during this storm, and know someone who was buried under rubble for hours because they were not able to escape in time.
Well, that level of devastation, it's just hard to hear. We know systems sometimes fail, but if you're saying the system was working properly just a couple of months before this.
Or just the day before, Areva, just the day before. Carla can attest to this. They tested the siren several times just the day before. And
so, Carla, again, this whole siren issue, is the mayor of St. Louis, to your knowledge, saying that the siren wasn't working on May 16th, was working on May 15th, or just that the person in charge of activating the siren didn't do so on May 16th? What is your understanding of what the city's position is?
So I watched her press conference that following Monday, and she indicated that it was human error. Which that's bad enough, but what frustrated me was that she essentially said that it was due to errors or miscommunication or unclear protocols from the previous administration, which I felt like she was just passing the buck. It wasn't taking responsibility for, okay, this happened under your watch and the sirens did go off previously. And she was an alderwoman for 10 years prior. So if there was an issue with the sirens, it wouldn't have been a secret.
Right. Yeah, unfortunate to hear that. Well, at least there was an admission of human error, although, as you said, trying to kick the can down the road or pass it off to a prior administration obviously is not a way to make residents like yourselves who lost so much in this storm feel good about the people who are leading through this. Speaking of that, the whole concept or the whole issue around FEMA, we've heard a lot about the dismantling of FEMA, the layoffs that have happened, the change at the top of the organization, some of the remarks made by the leader suggesting that perhaps he is not well suited for this job. Have you received any help from FEMA at this point?
No, I actually had the unique experience of running into a FEMA investigator at the hotel where my family and I were staying while we didn't have power. And what the person basically said was, they're going to do their job. They will do the investigation. They will submit the reports. But after that, they have no control over whether or not we will be approved for any FEMA funds. I do know for a fact that from the March storm, the area just got approved for that. So I'm not sure if FEMA will come through for this May 16th storm at all.
Has the city, to your knowledge, or the county or the state of Missouri made any funding available for things like temporary housing? I heard you say you ran into this FEMA investigator at a hotel. So obviously you had to incur, you and your family, some expenses staying at this hotel. Has there been any way of, seeking reimbursement for any of those costs?
To my knowledge, no. I am one of the fortunate that I do have insurance. My insurance absorbed the cost for us to be in the hotel, so I know how fortunate we are in that. The last thing that I saw, because I did look up some things this morning just to be able to say I'm fully prepared, knowledgeable about what's going on. There is money from the RAM settlement. Interest drawn from that settlement that has been earmarked for assistance. Past that, I don't know of anything else. I know the state legislature is meeting trying to keep the Chiefs and the Royals in Kansas City. I haven't seen anything about providing any help for St. Louis.
So, Carl, we know North St. Louis predominantly Black, brown community, but we also know Clayton and the Central West End, which are predominantly white communities, were hit by this storm. We're hearing 5,000 homes in St. Louis, 5 lives that were lost, $1 billion+ in losses. But when you look at this story, it doesn't seem to have generated a ton of national media attention. What do you think is behind that?
I do think part of it definitely lies in the bulk of the people affected. Predominantly Black areas, West End, North St. Louis. So I don't think that Black pain, Black suffering generates the appeal, for lack of a better word. Then also, there's so many things going on. I think sometimes human interest stories get overshadowed by the next crazy thing coming out, particularly from DC. But I do think a big chunk of it is the bulk of the people affected look like me, and that just doesn't generate the coverage.
And so I know, Carl, you said a couple of times that your family's blessed, that your house is still standing, that you had insurance, but help us understand some of that Black pain that you've witnessed firsthand in your community and in some of those North St. Louis communities.
This is my neighborhood. This is my community. I choose to be here. I chose to get a home here. It hurts to drive and see the devastation in the neighborhood. It hurts to know that so many people are literally homeless, sleeping in tents next to their homes or sleeping in their cars or wondering what they are going to do next. I see businesses that I used to frequent. They are just demolished. And I wonder if they will be able to rebuild. It hurts. It really hurts. I'm grateful that there have been so many grassroots organizations that have risen to the challenge to help people, but it really hurts just to see my neighborhood look like this. People may look at, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish. I'm sorry.
People may look at North St. Louis and think, oh, it's, it doesn't look great or anything like that. But it's a community, it's a neighborhood. Your neighbors look out for each other. My neighbors, we've really drawn on each other during this whole ordeal. People are coming together, and to see it in this state and knowing that not enough people seem to care hurts.
Obviously, you are a tax-paying resident of the city of St. Louis, the county of St. Louis, the state of Missouri. Do you feel like your elected leaders, those who you have elected, that you voted for, are responding with a level of urgency? I hear a sense of urgency in your voice. I hear that pain that you are feeling, that you're feeling for your neighbors. But are you feeling that the people elected to step up in these kinds of tragedies are doing everything they could do?
No, I don't. On a local level, I do feel like the current administration needs to be fighting more with the governor to get resources. I don't understand how there's only 41 National Guardsmen here. And the expectation of people to bring bulk debris to locations to be handled, it's almost a whole house behind my house. So I don't know who's supposed to come get that, because I absolutely cannot and will not.
So there's an expectation that folks like yourself are to pick up the rubble and take it to some location?
There are debris drop-off locations, yes, and that's where the National Guardsmen are. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because in the aftermath of the storm, literally my neighbor's roof was blocking my driveway.
Wow.
All of that has since been moved off, but who's supposed to come get that? Not me. What am I supposed to do? I don't have anything to do to get that. So I feel like the current administration really could be fighting for more assistance from the state. I can't lie and say that the state response with our current governor, I'm not that surprised by his lack of response. I'll just say that. I'm not surprised. But I do feel like the current administration in St. Louis could utilize resources that they have, donors that they've had to help them get elected, put those people to the task and get us more help.
So other than these 41 FEMA not FEMA, but 41 guards, National Guards people who are on the streets, are there any other, has the city deployed city workers, or has the state sent other state workers to help families remove debris and to just help them with this kind of cleaning up, this massive cleanup project?
Not that I have seen. I know the state, I can't think of anything else that they've done besides send the 41 National Guardsmen, and it took a while. It took over a week before they even got here. So it was neighbors helping neighbors. It was people coming in, from around the region helping. As far as the city, I've seen some city trucks. I think the task is overwhelming, which is why I feel like the state needs to step in. There needs to be more National Guardsmen. There's so much. The images look bad. It's really worse in person.
Wow. What would you say, Carla, if you had the opportunity to speak directly to the FEMA executive director and leaders in Washington, if you were able to get their full attention, what would you say to them now?
We need help, and it is ridiculous to expect your constituents, and essentially we are the bosses. These people, are in positions because of elections. So if we need help, it's their job to help us. It's part of what they're supposed to do, is to help us. We pay taxes for this. There's money earmarked for this. So to deny people help is absolutely ridiculous. Some people are at their absolute lowest point. They are homeless. They don't know what they're going to do. They're just trying to figure out what they're going to do day to day. Additionally, it shouldn't be solely upon grassroots organizations like Action STL and For the Culture and the People's Response. It shouldn't be solely up to them to provide food and help them get shelter and all of those other things. This is why we have the government that we're supposed to have. They're supposed to help. They're supposed to provide assistance.
Wow. Well, Carla, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for, just the resilience that you obviously are demonstrating, because your story will, I'm sure, encourage others who are at, you said, the very low point, because people are suffering. The images are horrible, and I can fully appreciate what you're saying. It's even worse on the ground than what the images portray. But these kinds of stories hopefully help get the word out, help put pressure on those folks in local government as well as our national government to do, as you said, what they have been elected to do, which is to do their jobs to help people in crisis because of a natural disaster like this tornado. Again, thank you, Carla, and we're going to continue to follow this story, and anything we can do here at the Special Report to get the word out, to help lift up this story, and to help encourage more resources to flow into St. Louis. Trust us, we are here for you. What happened in St. Louis, it's not an anomaly. It's a warning. It is a warning. The dismantling of FEMA is not just a policy shift, it's a moral one. And the question is, when disasters strike your neighborhood, who's going to show up? Who's going to be there for you? Will the government you fund, the elected officials you vote for, will they leave you stranded because of your zip code, because of the color of your skin, because of the neighborhood that you live in? And I just want to give a special thanks to Mayor Tishaura Jones, again to Carla, for their courage, for fighting, for standing up, for making me aware of this story. St. Louis is a community I care a great deal about. My relatives live there. My family is there. It's still home for me, even though I live in Los Angeles. And when it's hurting, I'm hurting. And I just want to say to everyone in that community, we're going to do everything in our power to lift this story up, to share this story as widely as possible, to help you put the kind of pressure that's necessary on your local elected officials, your state officials, and of course, Washington, D.C., to get the word out that we need you now, and we need you to make this community a priority. You've been watching the Special Report with Areva Martin. Stay informed, stay activated, stay empowered, and most of all, stay encouraged. Until next time. If you want more information about the Special Report, follow me across all social platforms at Areva Martin. Subscribe to my YouTube page and share the Special Report.
Calling all BIPOC college students, recent college graduates, and clinicians. Here's my story about CORE, a unique workforce development program that is changing lives. My brother is the most caring person you'll ever meet. With his autism diagnosis, my family had to fight to make sure that the resources he deserved were available. That's why my goal has always been to help children with developmental disabilities and give them chances my brother may have missed. So when I heard about the CORE Fellowship, I knew immediately it was for me. The fellowship opens doors for myself and others like me. They offer training, a stipend while you're learning, job placement, and they'll pay up to $10,000 of my student loan debt. The CORE Fellowship is going to allow me to achieve my life's purpose. They care about me, so I can care about others, like my brother. Visit the website to learn more about the CORE Fellowship. Discover your core passion, your power, and your purpose. Apply today.